Welcome to Carbon Connects, looking at the challenges pharma has faced, it currently is facing, and what it will be facing in the future.
The pace of innovation is so big that you can't do it alone.
Hello, I'm Henry Regan and welcome to this episode of Carbon Connects, where we welcome Marco Andre. Hello, how are you?
Nice of you to have me here.
Thank you so much for joining us. Could you tell us a little bit more about you, about the job role you're in now and how you got there?
So I work for Novartis. I'm responsible for all the generative AI and marketing excellence, which is the fancy word. I go around the company and I work with top leadership to understand how generative AI is changing pharma and how do you actually build a business in this ever really fast changing pace and dynamic that is happening with AI. That's what I do.
And how did you get there? So what led you up to the position that you're holding at the moment?
So my background is in tech. I worked for Google for several years and I've been in pharma just for 3 years. Roughly a year and a half ago, I started doing this role that I'm doing now, which is all about building a marketing capability for everyone across Novartis. And then I went to my manager at the time. This was in December 2022. And I said, listen, I think there's this new thing coming. I've been reading a lot about it. There's no point of teaching people, let's call it traditional marketing, because everything is going to change. So can I go and teach generative AI instead? And she said, listen, I trust you. I know you know nothing, but I also know that you're probably very curious and you can learn. And that's what I ended up doing, because I think it really is a time where none of us knows anything, because everything is changing so quickly that literally anyone can learn about AI and can actually go. And I talk about the fact that we all need to be bridgers, that there's so much change happening at the same time that any of us can actually read about what is happening and then help others bring them along the journey. Yeah.
Tell me about the learning curve for you, because that must have been quite steep.
Quite steep is an understatement. I think it's crazy for any of us. I think if you think about it, we have never experienced such a big technological change, at least not for sure in my lifetime. There's this lady, she's a futurist called Amy Wood, and she was talking about the fact that novelty is the new normal. And we it's not even as a generation, all the generations are living in this age. We've been hit with so much change, geopolitical, technological, and actually that's not gonna change. I talk about the fact that, I'm gonna talk about in the panel today, that we as humans, we look at the picture of a lake and we think, okay, we want our life to be like that. And then we look at a picture of a big waterfall and we spend the time telling to the waterfall, stop, 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 stop. But actually, it's not going to stop. So what I did basically was I read a lot about it, but I still think the way I learned about it, and there's a lot of things I don't know, is about using the tools. Because if you just keep on reading, what I felt is I was in constant anxiety of, okay, what am I missing out on? Whereas when I started trying different tools for different purposes is when I felt, okay, this is useful for me, and this is how I can use it to, I don't know, save time, allow me to be more creative, do less admin work. So I think if I had to give one piece of advice to myself a year ago would be, don't read so much about it to learn about it, use the tools, because that's how you'll learn faster.
So were there incremental steps in using the tools, or was it like a light bulb moment where you think, wow, this is going to change the way that I work?
I think it was incremental steps. And I think when I started to see something changing was when I started to think about AI first. So I'll give you an example. I was some time ago in a workshop with someone, and when we stopped, a colleague of mine, she was taking notes from a whiteboard. She was frantically typing notes for 10 minutes. So I went to her and I said, what are you doing? She said, oh, I'm just typing the notes. So I took ChatGPT on my phone, took a picture and said, transcribe this for me. So I did it in 5 seconds. And that was the light bulb moment for her. And for me, it was this idea that, okay, now I'm starting to think, even though I had never done that before, to first apply technology, see if it saves me time, and only after thinking about other possibilities. So I think it's very incremental. I don't think there's a light bulb moment. There's very exciting moments. I can tell you I've never done any kind of video editing in my life. It would take me like 5 hours and it would be something unusual. It's like if I try to iron a shirt, after half an hour, the shirt looks exactly the same. And now there's tools, for instance, to edit video, which are just absolutely incredible. So I think it's incremental in its testing and experimenting.
So where do you see the future of people? That's because that's something people are very nervous at the moment. Where do you see the future of the workforce with all these tools coming out?
I might have a bit of a romantic view, but I think if we make this technology work for us, I think is actually a possibility that we have to go back to human connection. A lot of people talk about burnout at work, and they think it's because people only work long hours. But the reality is there's a lot of 20 or 30% of our work, admin work, for instance, that we all have in our roles. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't give us joy. If we can put that work kind of aside, I don't know, preparing a presentation or analyzing a report, and focus instead of human connection and human interaction, I think there's a possibility for us to be more human. Now, there's a lot of things. We humans are very good with technology of making it, use it for good, but also use it for bad. Or it might be that we all retreat in a world, and human connection is not frictionless, right? And whereas with machines, it's probably easy because they don't push back on you. They know everything that we design them, so they know everything that you like, that you don't like. But for me, it's actually an opportunity to, I'll give you an example. I think, for instance, we spend a lot of time in screens nowadays. And a lot of what you see with AI is you're moving to these kind of agents in which you just talk to drive an action. And I think that's a tremendous opportunity, because if you go on the street nowadays, how many people are on their phones? And me too, very often. But I think there's an opportunity if you get the minds of people off their screens in certain actions that don't demand you to be in front of a screen, and instead interacting with people. I think that's an incredible opportunity.
How do you upskill on AI? And if you're going to give people steps to upskill themselves, where would you start? I mean, you talked about maybe not reading as much, but where would you start if you had to go back, or if you had to offer that advice to anyone else?
Mm-hmm. Get everyone in a room and get them to use the technology. Because there's only a certain point that you can talk about it. I think the three things that I talk specifically for humans, not for companies, is the first thing is talk about it. And I think a lot of people are talking about it, about the good, the bad, and the ugly. I think the second thing is use the tools, don't read about them. Use it to make it work for you, personally, professionally. Find a suggestion of a gift for your partner. Do if you want to do an anniversary theme for your kids' party, create an idea for that. Create an agenda for an offsite at work, something like that. So the second thing is do that. And I think the third thing is make it really work for you first. The eureka moments don't come from reading that someone did something with an incredible prompt. I was with a professor from Columbia 2 weeks ago, and he had a whole report of very smart things that I knew nothing about. And he was, which prompt shall I use to interpret the results? I said, okay, let's try it. But which prompt shall I use? I said, no, just put the document there, because it was non-confidential information, and just say, tell me what you see. And a lot of it is we've developed these very fancy words, prompt engineering, for instance. Prompt engineering is asking questions. So I think I have no idea, to be clear, of how the future will look like, but one thing I know, I think critical reasoning and knowing how to ask the right questions is going to be a key skill that we all will need to have across any generation.
What are the tools you use daily?
So I use a lot of obviously text-based tools, either Perplexity or Claude or ChatGPT. That's for these kinds of tasks in which I want, and I like to give concrete examples. You know, I need to have brainstorm an idea. For instance, yesterday for my presentation, I wanted to use this idea of Gen T or Gen Zero or Gen B. So I brainstorm actually as I'm walking. I talk to it. It's like my thinking buddy. I use other tools like Midjourney, CapCut, Agen for video. I do some videos on LinkedIn, etc. And I'm starting to play a lot, which is very cool, with music. There's Udio and the Suno app, which I think is incredible because you can show very quickly that you can just come up with an idea. I want to do a song about Henry and Marco on a Monday morning in the style of a hip-hop rhythm and blues mashup. And you just see the possibilities of creativity that can come out of it. So those are the things that I'm using.
We'll make sure we do it next time.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Your presentation, fantastic, absolutely amazing. And we talked a little bit before this interview about my career as an actor as well. It's difficult, and I think people don't see that. People see the beautifully polished Marco. But you were telling me that you do preparation and it's really important to you. So you could tell us a little bit more about how you prepare for being on stage in front of, hundreds or thousands of people.
I think this comes to this thing that we developed, this idea that we all need to be polished, that leaders need to be, and that everyone has it figured out, which is putting pressure on all of us to be perfect, and we're not. And of course, there's a lot of preparation. I'm very far from a natural. So what I do to prepare is a couple of things. Is one, I try to put myself really in the shoes of people who are going to be there, and I don't intend that they leave there lectured on something, but they just take one action they can do differently that day. So I develop kind of before developing any slides or anything, I just develop a story. That's the first thing. The second thing is it's preparation. I have slides, but I almost don't rely on them. I practice and practice and practice every word, every sentence. And then obviously it's a bit like jazz. You have a structure and then you improvise in the middle, but it is preparation. And I think the third thing is I am quite shy and introverted, so being on stage is obviously daunting for me. So I have a series of things. So I meditate, I exercise. Before going on stage, I put my headphones as loud as I can, noise cancelling. I heard some Chemical Brothers just to hype me up. And I think I think nowadays our attention span is so small, so I feel I need to make it worth for them. So if people are on their phones, it's not because they're distracted, but because I'm not doing a good job enough to have created something that is worthy of listening and worthy of doing something on the different day. But again, I do all of this and I do it every time. And I think we should be more open about it because in reality, no one has everything figured out 100% of the time.
It's so refreshing to hear, just to let you know. So what's the future of your role? What's your vision for what you want to try and achieve in the not so distant future?
One of the things I talked about yesterday, I think the good news is a lot of people are using AI at work, more than 78% of people. The bad news is a lot of people are bringing their own AI to work, and half of them are not telling their employers. So I think there's a couple of stigmas, and that's what I intend to do, at least within my limited realm of influences. But to bust the stigma that using AI is cheating, right? I wouldn't show up in doing a presentation with some handwritten postcards. I use PowerPoint. No one says I use PowerPoint, I cheated. So I think there's a bit of a stigma on that. The second thing is I don't think companies are realizing, again, because this is all very fast, how much reskilling needs to be done across the 4 generations. So the training for me is not so much that you now can create a video in 30 seconds. That's not the point. The idea is that you can use those tools, look at all the things that change across your value chain. It's not that we're going to stop, for instance, in pharma to talk with healthcare professionals or patients. But those healthcare professionals and patients are going to be super informed because they have all the information they need at the click of a button. So my idea is to continue speaking with those leaders, show them the tools, and then making them realize how things are changing so fast and how they can bring their teams along, realizing it's a big change, and how they make people safe to fail and experiment and remove the stigma that using AI is not cheating. Probably what's going to happen, the one thing I can predict about the future, I don't think I can predict anything else, is that in 2 years, we're not going to be talking about AI. It's just a tool. It's just how we do things here.
How do we make sure we're staying patient-centric in an ever-changing digital landscape?
It's really hard. What I try to do is to follow the behaviors. So I remember, for instance, in my previous company, I think it was in 2012, our CEO came forward and he said, we are going mobile first, because I think in 5 years, everyone is going to be spending more time on their phones than on their desktop. We thought, no way this is ever going to happen. If I ask you nowadays, if you spend more time on your phone or on your desktop, we know the answer. I think what's happening with patients now, patients are becoming super informed and they're taking a bit more ownership. I don't think HCPs have so much gatekeeping on his primary care, for instance. So they're coming with harder questions and very good questions. I told yesterday in my presentation about the story of Alex's mom.
Yep.
She went through 17 doctors over 3 years, which all gave a different diagnosis. And then she took the information she had, the notes, the exams, put it on ChatGPT and found the diagnosis.
In 30 minutes.
In 30 minutes. So it's not so much that the doctors didn't do a good job, is they probably sometimes spend a lot of time on admin work, they don't have access to information as they have right now. I think what's going to happen is patients are going to be way more informed. So if we follow that behavior, where the world is going, we need to make sure that where they get their information, they get the right information, which is quite important. And I think the second thing is we are living in a bit of an assistive world right now. You're going to have, call it agents, these all fancy names, but you're going to have help for everything. If you think about, for instance, patient adherence, I would love to have something, if I'm getting a course of treatment, that checks on me periodically, on my wearable, for instance. If I don't have a wearable, just reminds me to take my medication. And I think that's the behavior we need to follow.
How do we know when advocacy is achieved?
We forget sometimes, I think that happens in any industry really, that we're talking about real people, right? We're talking about consumers and patients and even sometimes businesses, but because at the end of those businesses, there's also humans buying from us. I think we need to make sure that we find very concrete ways to keep in touch with those people. So for instance, in one of my previous companies, P&G, we had something called Consumer Connect. So every month, we would really go into a consumer's house, literally into their bathroom with them and say, why are you using this product? Why are you not? What do you like about it, etc. I saw a presentation very, very good recently of Andrew Binns from AstraZeneca, and he was saying that in pharma it's very difficult to actually be in touch with our patients and our customers, which makes our job easier. So I'm not advocating for that because I know there's obviously regulation and everything, but all the more opportunities we have to realize that at the end of our launch plans and development plans, there's actually real people with real problems. If we can keep in touch with that, I think that makes our job way more effective.
You seem to have everything sorted, but obviously you're still going to need support, whether that's in-house or from external partners. What do you look for when looking for external partners?
The pace of innovation is so big that you can't do it alone. And I think figuring out how to partner and who to partner in the next couple of years for any company will make or break the company. What I look for specifically is the technology, yes, but also people that can help drive that kind of capability and culture of experimentation with the technology. And that's equally important because we can't, or at least I don't believe in talking down to people, saying, oh, you're missing out on the future. That doesn't lead people anywhere. I believe in taking even the most skeptical of people, bring them along. Because if you win someone that is skeptical, either because they're afraid or they're not as curious, it doesn't matter. Those are the people that can help you drive the change. So I tend to look for partners that have, yes, obviously the technology component, but also have that ability and the patience to put the investment to bring people along the way.
And what makes a good pitch then?
Good question. The best pitches for me are made of two things. One, you did the research, and even though you don't know what is exactly my problem, you bring an hypothesis and a solution. That's, for me, the best pitches. It's not coming with everything boxed, but actually asking the right questions to understand what's the business problem. Those are the ones that work for me. I'll give you an example. 3 years ago, before all this AI craze, I was working with a provider when I was working in Sandoz, in Novartis. And we were doing exactly something that was very ahead of time. We were doing a pilot of recording the calls with consent between us at work and figuring out what are the main themes, the main keywords, the sentiment. What I liked about them is they didn't say, oh, we're going to do a tech implementation because we know you're pharma, we know you have all of these regulations. So they worked with us hand in hand to adapt it to the reality of pharma instead of just taking, okay, here's the technology that I just took from a completely different industry. Here you go in a box. That's it. And that's the kind of interaction and pitch that I look for.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time. That's what we've got time for. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
3, 2, 1.
Nice to meet you again. I'm Alyssa Fenolio. I am the global head of digital commercial at Teva. What is your team strategy, your brand strategy, your company strategy? What is your purpose? That's the guiding light for all of this. We've got to have a curious mindset to dig into the data to understand what's happening. Now, AI can help us with that.